Okay, so DigiCert, you fairly recently published your 2024 State of Digital Trust Survey. And good place to start would be just with a high level finding. And also, I don't know if it's the first time you've done it or if you've done it before, just sort of contrast this year's results with anything you've done previously.
I'm excited to talk with you about the findings that we've had from our State of Digital Trust survey. We have been doing this for a handful of years, and as a leader in digital trust, we like to keep our finger on the pulse of all things digital and all things trust. And I would say that every year that we do it, I find as the world becomes more digital, the importance of trust and the importance of being able to trust all the digital connections in our lives continues to rise. And I think this year, the survey certainly we're seeing specifically a rise in even the use of the term digital trust. I think there are a handful of things that drive some of the change and the improved importance or the growing importance of it. I think more and more workforces are at home. Like today, I'm not in the office space. I'm actually working from my home, and that's a common practice. COVID kind of drove that, and I think it's standard practice. And because of that, when you're extending trust outside the walls of your enterprise, you need to make sure that those connections can be trusted. And so ensuring that you have connected remote work, networks are becoming more complex as the world expands digitally. And then another trend that we've seen different this year is we're starting to see a growing importance of consumers asking for trusted solutions. And because of that, enterprises are having to prioritize the trustworthiness of the products that they're building, deploying, whether that be software, devices, any kind of enterprise solution. Trust is absolutely becoming more critical, and customers are starting to ask for it, and that's a good thing.
And if I remember correctly, the survey identifies sort of three broad groups when it comes to digital trust: the sort of the leaders, the folks in the middle, shall we say, and then those that are maybe not as advanced as they need to be. And in terms of the leaders, what does the survey reveal in terms of the benefits, the rewards that those people who right on top of digital trust, what do they get out of it, as it were, in terms of
you're right. So the survey identified three groups: leaders, laggards, and then those in the middle. And leaders had a distinct advantage. The leaders are those that are engaging in more mature digital trust practices. They're being proactive in protecting their enterprises and doing the right things to ensure trust. And they're experiencing far fewer disruptions, outages, data breaches, things that cause havoc and cost money for organizations. They had far fewer incidents. And so, the question is, what are they doing differently? And I think the first one is they are recognizing and prioritizing digital trust. It's not something they just talk about. It's actually something that they create positions for, they put money towards, and they actually monitor and track the efforts. There are a handful of common characteristics among the leaders. One is, as I talked about, it's prioritization of digital trust. The second one is a centralized approach for security. So having governance policies and having policies where they're doing enablement and training of employees, where they're doing testing and making sure that they're not just talking a good trust game, but they're actually they're walking the walk, and they're centralizing their security approaches and following up to make sure they're being effective.
Okay, and perhaps you could contrast that with the other end of the spectrum, if you like, the laggards. What is it that they are missing out on, and digital transformation innovation? Just how do they suffer by not taking the topic of digital trust sufficiently seriously, or even having started out on the journey, shall we say?
Yeah, so I think, it's the opposite of what the leaders experience, right? So leaders are avoiding outages and data breaches, and laggards are certainly experiencing those. I think a lot of the mindset in the laggards is that when it comes to security, it's somebody else's problem. And I think that a lot of organizations before a breach or before an outage would probably say, that's probably not going to happen to us. And they have a false sense of security. And I think that that was one of the things that the survey highlighted, is that those in the laggards group have a false sense of security. They think that it's someone else's problem, right? And security is a hard topic for some executives to understand, because one, if you don't have the technical background to really understand risk, it can sometimes feel like it's someone else's problem. Um, it's the organization down the road that got breached. It will never happen to you. Um, and oftentimes we see that organizations only spend money where they are experiencing pain or where they see opportunity. And you don't organizations today are not separating themselves as a competitive advantage because of security. And so it's less of an opportunity, and it's not a pain until something bad happens to you, right? And so a lot of executives, unless they really have the foresight to see ahead and potential risk, they can become complacent. And I think that that's a common characteristic of the laggards, is they become complacent and they feel like it's someone else's problem and they don't prioritize it.
Okay, and I know the survey asked about some specific sets of metrics there, and I think data protection and compliance issues were particularly the focus. So can you give us some idea of what was revealed when you asked folks about those two, I guess, complementary issues?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to break those apart. Maybe I'll start with data protection, because I think there was a really interesting finding. I think from the survey around IoT connected devices, which clearly are growing significantly across the world. The survey revealed that 86% of traffic coming from devices, connected devices, is unencrypted today, which is startling to me. It's not, I shouldn't say it's startling, because I have high expectations that organizations are acting more responsibly than that, but I know reality is different. But 86% of that traffic being unencrypted is concerning, because those devices, you think about the number of the amount of personal identifiable information, financial data, even intellectual property that organizations might be transmitting in a firmware update or software update to a device. And so that's an area of concern around data protection. More and more data is being generated by devices around the world, and that data needs to be protected. So that was startling. The other one, you asked about compliance and the benefits of digital trust with compliance. Now, I would say that the world of compliance around trust is evolving. We're beginning to see more regulation. We're beginning to see more industry standards that are actually requiring trust, that are requiring organizations to do these things. So the leaders that we surveyed clearly would say, hey, it's easier for us to achieve compliance because we're doing the right things. And so better digital trust practices put organizations in a better position to be compliant with emerging or existing regulation or industry standards. It's that simple. Organizations that are laggards, when regulations pop up, they have a lot more work to do to put in place the systems, the processes, to have trust as part of what they're doing to be compliant. And so compliance is a really important driver in security. I heard recently that it was either 60 or 70% of every security dollar is related to compliance. So what that tells me is that organizations spend money when they have to spend money on trust, right? You get a regulator to tell us we have to do it, then we'll start doing it. And so compliance is a really, really important thing. But even in the existence where there's no regulation, I would tell organizations to still start moving, because if there aren't already, those regulations are coming. Trust is on the rise. Regulations are starting to emerge that are requiring systems, especially around critical infrastructure and things like that, to be secure.
And in terms of, but just back to our three groups quickly, clearly the leaders that are doing good things can be reasonably comfortable that their digital trust is front and center for themselves. The laggards potentially, although they're not doing a very good job, probably realize that and therefore know they've got to do something. I'm just wondering, in a funny kind of way, are the folks in the middle that perhaps the most vulnerable because they maybe think they're doing a good job, but they haven't actually got where they need to, or is that just
Yeah, yeah,
overthinking things?
certainly. And yeah, that's the middle group is an interesting one, right? Because it's I think that there's more complacency. I think the survey that we did highlighted that I think it was the bottom two groups that struggle with complacency, and that being one of the reasons for not fully engaging and improving their digital trust practices. And so I think the middle group I wouldn't say they're more at risk, because the laggards certainly are not doing the right things to put their organization out of harm's way. But I would say that those in the middle are at just as much risk, because they haven't fully engaged. Security is an approach that really needs to be baked into the DNA of the way you operate. And when you are only like you put a couple toes in, it doesn't allow you to fully protect your system. You still have massive vulnerabilities and risks. And so, one of the characteristics of the leaders is they go all in on it. And they don't just say, hey, let's check a couple boxes to make sure that we're in a better place. As I said, security has to be baked into the DNA of the way you operate. You think about onboarding employees. Are you enabling and training them to avoid risky behavior? If you're building systems, are you doing penetration testing to make sure that you've identified and mitigated vulnerabilities? What are the things you're doing to continually test your organization and the systems that you're building and deploying to make sure that you're staying on top of security? Security is ever evolving as well. It's not something that you protect today and you're good for 10 years. You have to continually evolve your practices to make sure that you're staying ahead of cyber threats and the latest technology. And so, I think that those bottom two groups and middle ground, it certainly is risky, because they haven't fully embraced that mindset of let's operate in a secure way.
And I suppose the important question from all of this is, how easy is it or not to become a digital trust champion organization? What's involved in getting to where you need to be, I suppose.
Yeah, so I think there's a handful of things that organizations need to do, and this came out in the survey as well, as some of the leaders' characteristics of things that they were doing. The first one is you need to take inventory of your practices. And I really, when I think about taking inventory, I think about assessing risk. Where are you most vulnerable? And having a healthy understanding of that. Once you have that inventory, then it comes down to setting policies and being able to enforce policies in your organization. What are the expectations of the way you build products? What are the expectations of the way you deploy products? What are the expectations of the way your employees act, and the protections you have around them, whether that be smart access to sensitive areas or data protection of your employee information. You need to make sure that you have policies to manage those risks and protect the systems you're building and the resources that you have. And so take inventory, define policies and procedures, The third one, and this is a trend that we see, is centralization of security approaches. Now, um, DigiCert, we play in the cryptography space. Public key infrastructure is core to what we do, and we see a lot of our customers and a lot of companies coming to us right now to centralize the management of PKI. A lot of organizations in our survey a couple of years ago, we found operate 4 or 5 different PKIs within their organization. Today, we see that changing. We see organizations centralizing to get more visibility, transparency, control, and being able to enforce policies and procedures around the way those PKIs are managed. So centralization of security is another trend, and it's a characteristic of the leaders that I think is a really good approach. And so, if you're listening to this, you have a handful of different PKIs running your organization, you don't know how to manage. A lot of them manage them on spreadsheets. And so being able to have tools and the ability to centralize that so you can see how all of those are operating is important. And it's not just with PKI. It would be with any kind of security approach that you're trying to enforce across your organization. Having centralized policies and tools that you can offer to your teams is a way to set yourself apart. And then the final one is, you've now you've identified your risk, you have policies around it. Then the last one is prioritizing and making sure that you're spending your energy and your time in the areas where your organization is most at risk. And so prioritize. And that's a very common approach with security professionals, knowing how to do risk assessments and prioritize your approaches based on that. And I think if organizations need to take those are relatively high level, but I think give good directional input for organizations that are starting to embark on digital trust and trying to improve the security posture of their organization.
Yeah, and I mean, is it possible for those people that are fully aware that they've got a long way to go, or they're even starting out on the journey, are one or two of those, or is there a particular thing on which to focus in the early days? Because I imagine if you try and do everything all in one go, you'll potentially just end up confusing yourself. So is just one or two key sort of things to focus on, maybe early doors.
Yeah, so I mean, I think making sure that you have the right executive support so that you can begin making the changes to improve the security posture of your organization. Once you do that, I think that's a good one. You put me on the spot here. I would say, of those, once you have executive support, I think understanding the risks in your organization is really important. You can't protect what you don't know. And so if you don't understand the risks or where you're vulnerable, it's hard to find a starting point. And so I would do a risk assessment, and I would understand where you're most vulnerable, and then I would prioritize your work based on that.
And maybe just finally, as you outlined earlier in the conversation, it's not a project you run and then you file it away because you've done it. It's an ongoing. So is there anything advice you'd give to people to make sure that they are continually, focusing on it, rather than I say, 1st of January we're doing it, 1st of May we've done it, so we'll come back to it, 2 years time or so. I'm sure people aren't quite that cavalier, but just to keep it front and center of people's mind all the time, as opposed to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be a mindset, right? It has to be a growth mindset of, this isn't something we're going to do and then forget it. You have to make sure that you're having regular reviews, that you're updating things. An example, I was speaking about this with an organization yesterday. A lot of people are talking about quantum computing today, and that, there are quantum computers that exist today. They're not generally available, but we believe that in the coming years, that quantum computing will arrive. Now, what does quantum computing mean to security? It means it will obliterate all of today's security practices, because they're so strong and they're so powerful. They'll be able to crack today's encryption algorithms, right? They'll be able to crack RSA and ECC, and they'll be able to wreak havoc on cryptography. So the way you prepare for that is not the way you prepare for that is to have what I call crypto agility. And that means that you can update any crypto or certificate, anything that's using cryptography in your organization through really easy mechanisms. You have automation, you have the ability to rotate credentials, and you can do that in an easy way. And that's why we see organizations starting to centralize their approaches, because it gives them better management so that they can then update and rotate credentials with the latest algorithms that will be quantum resistant. And those algorithms are actually going to be released later this year by the National Institutes of Standards and Technology. And so as you think about security being evolving, that's an example of where it's really, really needed, right? And you need the ability to do that. Now, there might be an update to cryptography between now and when quantum computing arrives. And even in that instance, you still need the ability to update your approaches. And so that's why having systems that allow you to update what you're doing, to automate the renewal and the enhancements so that you can stay ahead of security threats is really important. And it takes that mindset of ever improving and always getting better to stay ahead of the bad guys.
Okay, you've introduced a topic dear to my heart, but we all perhaps revisit that at a later stage.
All
Quantum
right.
computing opens up a whole new
Oh, nice.
landscape. But at least for now, Mike, it's been fascinating to chat to you, some lovely insights into what's going on. So really appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Philip, thank you. Really appreciate and enjoyed our conversation today.
Thanks again.